All right. All right. We are live on Facebook. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Smart with Your Money Live. I am Chase Peckham. I am the Director of Community Outreach and Education at the San Diego Financial Literacy Center, the education arm of DebtWave Credit Counseling. And I'm so happy to have back my compatriot and colleague, Felipe Arevalo, to be able to talk to somebody during one of these Smart with Your Money Lives. Last week, I was just doing all the talking. I felt like I was just soaking up everything and just sucking up all the air. But, you know, such is life when you're doing a presentation and you're in a Zoom and you can't really talk to anybody else.
Yeah, I'm back. I was doing some Spanish presentations, so I missed the last one, but I am back. And today we're going to talk about sandwich generation and the financial considerations that go along with it. It's a big ticket. It's a big deal. And we'll go over lots of different things, as well as some things you can do to avoid being a burden in the sandwich, and lots of things that maybe all the different layers can do to kind of move the sandwich in a better
Absolutely, because this is a very interesting conversation, because a lot of people may not even understand what the sandwich generation is.
Right.
But it is something that we find that is very common in many different cultures, many different societies. But in the US here, we probably gave it that sandwich generation. I think it was garnered in the 1970s or 80s in a sociology.
It's actually in the dictionary now, because it's become so common. I think it's in the Merriam-Webster dictionary. So it's a real thing, and it's not in between Gen Z and Gen Y or this generation and that generation. It's something completely different, and we'll go over that here in a little bit. So thank you for joining us, and we'll get started. We're not talking about food, although some of the gifts may be food related. And I had to put a picture of my wife's sandwich art that was literally a giant canvas that's put in our dining room. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about the sandwich generation, where one individual is providing for both maybe older parents, grandparents, and then also trying to provide and raise for their children. So they're sandwiched in between other generations, causing financial stress, if they're supporting financial, or just in general, just stress, because it isn't always just the financials that go along with it. There's caring for, if you have kids, you know how much time consuming they are. I love them to death, but they take up a lot of time. And caring for an elder family member could also take up that same, if not more, amount of time. So it's that generation that's kind of stuck in the middle. And if it's
it's interesting. You know, it's funny that so many. It's not funny, but we're born, we're young, and then we go through our lives, and then we age, and then it's funny because so many people will say, "I feel like I'm right back to being a kid again," because they're being taken care of. Right? They're taken care of at the beginning of their lives, and they're being taken care of at the end of our lives, and we're all going to be there someday. Right. So we all have to be understanding that there's different roles we're going to play throughout our lives. And a lot of them are going to be pretty stressful.
Yeah. My 8-year-old told me today, he said, "Dad, you're not good at technology." And I was like, "Oh, wait 20 years before you come back and tell me that. Right now, I'll still fix your iPad. I can change the time on the VCR." But at some point, you know, I may not be able to keep up with the technology. So who knows?
Or you just don't want to.
Or I don't want to. You know, I don't want a Snapchat. I don't want a TikTok. Not my thing. Which some people tell me makes me seem a little old. So there's different kinds of sandwiches. And this is a food sandwich, but it goes along with the financial conversation. There's the open-faced sandwich, where the individual may not have younger children, but they may be taking care of multiple generations that are older than them. An adult taking care of parents and then grandparents, where it's open-faced. Maybe they don't have children, and you know, so that causes its own financial stress. People are like, well, I'm not going to have kids. That doesn't mean you can't end up being part of a sandwich generation if you don't have kids. It just, you might end up being an open faith sandwich. I hope you guys have lunch and no one's hungry while they're watching this, because
I will tell you, after our podcast recording yesterday, and we talked about this very subject, I did make my way to Jersey Mike's. So I was very hungry after this discussion.
I almost did. So you have the open face sandwich, and then maybe that person has kids and now they're part of a club sandwich. I didn't make this up, guys. I didn't put sandwich names to all.
No, this is a real thing.
Right. And the club sandwich is when there are multiple layers either above or below. So it might be a parent taking care of parents and grandparents and then their kids, or it could be someone taking care of their parents, their kids, and their grandkids. So it can shift across different generations. But it's basically, now we're talking not one person sandwiched between two generations, and the financial stress and the emotional stress and the time constraint that goes along with it. But now they're stuck between two on top and one on the bottom, or vice versa. And now it's even more time, more money, more stress. So that sandwich can get really complicated. And that makes it harder for the sandwich to stay together. You ever eaten a sandwich? Sorry for the analogy, but as the sandwich gets bigger, it's harder to keep it all together. It's got to be better organized. It's got to be, you kind of have a plan of how you're going to grab onto this sandwich. So, it's something where the more layers, the more complicated it could potentially get. Yeah,
it's like thinking of the toothpick as a plan. Right? That the plan, creating a plan and helping with the multi-generational household, that toothpick is like the plan that holds the sandwich together. Man, too many of these analogies.
Right. And I apologize if my audio is not coming in through. I don't know if it's my audio or
no, you sound great.
Or something. Okay. So I apologize for Chase's audio then, or maybe I'm just hearing it funny. I think there's a delay on my end, so I apologize. But technology, we're trying to figure it out as well. So much for me telling my kid that I'm good with technology. So going on to the sandwich generation, it's becoming more and more prevalent. 1 in 7 Americans between 40 to 60, according to a Pew Research study, are part of the sandwich generation. As of 2018, more than 1 in 10 parents, or over 8 million Americans, have a child in their home that they're providing for and unpaid care to an adult. And that's according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. And part of that is that live long and prosper, but people are living longer lives. So those older generations are around longer. There's potentially more expenses or a longer retirement to plan for, more potential for that money to run out at some point or another. So with lifespans increasing, there's more generational overlap potentially. So now there's more potential to, have it be where someone ends up in a sandwich generation. Maybe those older people can end up in that sandwich generation more than previous before. Someone in their 60s caring for their parents, but then also caring for their kids, and then also caring for their grandkids, and it just kind of shifts. But at the end of the day, if that's not, planned out, there could be a lot of, financial and other ramifications to it. So it's not always just about the money. Working caregivers spend approximately 3 hours daily caring for their parents and their children. And just being a parent, how much of your time goes into caring for the kids and making sure that their schoolwork is done and driving them to practice and trying to make sure that they eat their vegetables, because if you let them eat whatever they want, they'll just eat cookies. And it's something where, it's time consuming. That time consuming causes stress. It's potentially, a lot of people have to take time off work to drive parents to appointments, and possible missed career opportunity, career progression, because they're not fully vested in their work causes some people to sometimes have to leave the full-time workforce and go back to part-time to help care for an elder or an aging parent. And it's something where there's a lot of financial ramifications, but even just the time constraint, even just a couple hours a day that they spend, maybe swing by after work to check on, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, or whoever, that's time that now they don't have to themselves to take care of themselves, to relax, to make a better meal, to whatever it is that they like to do, sleep. And so it's not always just about the financials that goes along with it.
Well, and they say time is money, right?
Yeah.
And it really is. I think that, and there's different levels of this, and people are starting to plan for this. We're seeing more and more families starting to realize, okay, mom and dad are pretty healthy. They've got a certain amount. What can we do to lessen the financial burden and the time burden? And a lot of these homes that are being built now have what they call a multi-gen. Yeah, right. Yeah, they'll have a gen flat in it, next gen, because those families are starting to move together again. And a lot of times this is just cultural, where families, when they get to certain places in their lives, they take care of each other, and there's new patriarchs and all of that. So this is not something new. It's just something that's now got a name on it. And we're starting to plan for it a little bit more because, as you said, people are living longer, and we're having to think about, how do I take care of my parents? And it's as simple. My mom passed away. My father is still living on his own, doing well, but I have to take care of him in certain ways. Like you mentioned technology. My dad doesn't know how to use his phone for an Uber. He doesn't have a computer to go online and look up stuff. So he called me and he said, I need to take my car in. Can you get one of those Ubers for me? And I had to literally order it for him, find out where he is. So that's time out that I have to figure out how to do that. So it goes in so many different ways.
Right. And it's something where it can, progress slowly, or sometimes there's medical emergencies, and then all of a sudden it's like a big shock to the system. And I think that's really when it becomes, when there's no plan and there's
Yes.
that financial or that medical emergency or that significant change in plans that kind of derails the whole thing.
Absolutely.
So unfortunately, we also impact is more severe on women. Mothers in the sandwich generation feel more stressed than any other age group between 35 and 54. And really, they're more likely to spend time caring. They're more likely to lose out on work opportunities or leave the workforce, or, potentially leave full-time. So statistically speaking, it affects women more than it affects men, the whole sandwich generation. And,
when the sandwich generation was coined, it was basically the beginning with a study with women in this situation.
Yeah, so it's definitely, and it can add more stress. They have more childcare responsibilities oftentimes. So what can be done? What can you do? What can we do as potentially as a larger part of the economy? Well, if you're elderly parents, if you're part of the elderly parents, or if you have elderly parents, have a talk about finances. I know we say it all the time. Communication is key.
Yes, sir.
You've got to communicate. What is their financial situation? You talking about it is not going to make it any worse or any better. What financial plans do they have, if any? What financial plans do they still have time to make, if any? Depending on how elderly the elder part of the sandwich is. So have that difficult financial conversation. What are the expectations? What if there's multiple siblings? What is the expectations in that case for sibling A, B, and C? And it's something where, having that conversation, what's the plan? What's the plan, if any? Because maybe there isn't a plan, and that's all right. But now you could realize that there isn't one and start planning with whatever time you have to plan for that.
Right. And that talk begins with, as if you're on the older generation, the senior generation, they have to just have to be open and honest with their kids, and then the siblings have to discuss so much about how are we going to handle this if this scenario arises. Who lives closest? That's usually who gets the brunt of the work. I have many friends that are going through all of this right now, where siblings could be all over the country. One of the siblings is closest, so people are flying all over the place, but it ultimately will fall on the person that's closest or that family. But you can be a support network for everybody. And that's extraordinarily important that everybody discusses this. So everybody feels like they have their say and ultimately has the best intentions for that older generation and how everything gets taken care of going forward.
Yeah. And if you are the older generation, have the young ones sit down and talk to you. It can be and not everyone wants to be part of a sandwich.
No.
So, some people are trying really hard to avoid being that top layer of the sandwich and having to depend on people who are younger than them. And that's okay. Some people in the middle don't want to be part of the sandwich. So at least who wants to be part of what, or who's willing to be part of what. Sometimes it's not even that they want to, but like they're willing to. So, right. Have that conversation with those elderly parents. If you have adult children who are part of the sandwich, encourage them to go out and contribute. Encourage them to contribute financially, contribute otherwise. Maybe they go pick up grandma and grandpa and drive them to the doctor's appointment or whatever it is.
Yes.
But if you have adult children that are part of the sandwich that are not contributing,
that are living at home, coming back after college, or
boomerang killed children, or children that haven't left yet, whatever the case may be, have them contribute in a fair way. And it's not unfair to say, hey, you know what, you're living here. It's time for you to help out. You're
an adult.
Yeah, you're an adult. This is market value for your rent. Maybe I'll give you a little bit of a discount. Or, you want to live here, you drive grandma and grandpa to all their appointments.
Yeah, they got to help out.
Whatever it is, help out in some way or another. It's tough, though. I talk to parents sometimes who have adult children who are struggling financially. And I say, well, you got two 20-something-year-olds living at home. Do they pay rent? Do they pay their utilities? Why are you paying their cell phone? And it's something like, oh, I can't ask them to do that. Yeah,
because they feel the obligation of being a parent.
Right. But
at some point, the kids got to grow up.
You got to reach out and you got to say, hey, look, for the sandwich to work, you got to contribute to it. And that could ease the stress. Obviously, I joke around with my 8-year-old that, like, hey, look, buddy, everywhere's hiring. You can go get a job. That's a joke. We're not going to send them to go work at 8 years old. But if they're 20-something, if they're adult children, it could be something where they should be able to contribute. So far, a sandwich maker is the only thing that's interested my 8-year-old as his part-time job.
Well, when your kids get to be older and they get into their, tweens and teens, they can contribute in many different ways. And whether that's doing dishes, whether that's cleaning up the house, helping with the backyard, taking the trash out, there's so many things that can help alleviate some of the stresses that we find on ourselves that we may not see as a financial contribution, but it really is, because that is things that you're not having to do. So contributions can come in many different ways.
Yeah. If I save time because I don't have to take out the trash, or I don't have to, clean the sink or with dishes or whatever, that's stress relieving. And that's something that can be taught to even younger parts.
And those kids will feel like they're contributing to something. And that's honestly important.
They like the purpose after they get over the fact
we all need a purpose. Absolutely.
Yeah. So what can be done? You can talk to a certified financial planner, and we have our Smart With Your Money financial opportunity clinics. They're virtual or over the phone, so geography doesn't matter. You can reach out and register from anywhere. If you're watching this on record and it's past May, go on the website. It's there. It's going to be on all year, but it's an opportunity to register, talk to a certified financial planner. Maybe you talk to them with your family member. Maybe you encourage your family member to join you. You guys sit there together or have them register. It doesn't matter what part of the sandwich is joining, but it's an opportunity to talk to them and have more of a plan in place.
You won't believe how stress relieving it can be to have somebody that really knows what they're doing take a look at your situation and help you create a roadmap for yourself, create direction, because so many of us are spinning our wheels and thinking we're doing the right things, yet there's probably a lot of stuff that we don't know that, and they can see that can help us guide help with not only our planning, but the planning for what's going to happen when our parents are in a situation when they can't take care of themselves. Is it best that they move in? Is it best that we sell their home? We move in. A lot of families are like, their parents' homes are that they have been paid for. And so the parents might say, you know what, it's cheaper. You no longer do you need to pay the rent, move in here, and then they can pay the rent for their parents to live somewhere else. And there's a place for their kids to expand and all that. So there's all kinds of things that you can do. You just have to open your mind to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is an opportunity to talk to, thanks to our friends at the Foundation for Financial Planning for allowing us to put on the program. But it's great. It's an opportunity to talk, no strings attached, pro bono planner, and really just kind of get a better picture of maybe how you break the sandwich cycle, or you make the sandwich a better put together, less stressful sandwich. Some of the factors,
it's one of the great programs we have, and I can't stress it enough. It's to be able to speak to somebody at that high level for free about anything it's really, really, really great.
Yeah. And some of the factors that we, cause it's a cycle. The sandwich generation is a cycle, and it's as is the case with most cycles, financial and otherwise, they're hard to break. So it's the failure to save for retirement puts stress there then potentially on younger generations. But if you're providing financial support for the previous generation, then how do you save for your own retirement and for your children's future? And then is the even one generation younger, now you don't have college savings, whereas someone else might. You take out loans if you have to, and then now you find the first few years of your career paying back student debt, which then puts you further behind on getting started for your own retirement planning. So it's something where it can cycle from one generation to the next, and really it may take more than one generation to break the cycle, but it does take some effort to get started on putting in the effort, realizing this is an issue, this is a potential issue down the road. Let's figure out, let's come up with a plan, let's communicate, and let's turn this thing around.
Yeah, you want to communicate before it's too late, because a lot of times people discuss things when things really start to get bad. If you reached out a little bit more when you realized that you were struggling with this or something, that the people around you can fix it before it gets to a catastrophic situation.
Yeah. I'm not saying it's easy. I understand it's difficult. And I'm not saying that everyone starts at the same spot, because everyone starts at a different financial spot. Some people have more advantages and some people have more disadvantages, and you're going to fall somewhere on that spectrum. And, but that doesn't mean that wherever you are financially, you can put in the effort to change that for the better. So, any questions from Facebook? Any questions from
the live feed itself? Felipe, I know your family, you come from a long generation of family from Mexico, and you have quite a large family. Is this something that is discussed within your family? Is there things that they've done?
I missed the first part of your question.
I'm sorry.
I caught the end. One of us is breaking up.
One of us is breaking up. Okay. It's probably me because you're not.
Okay.
Am I good now?
Yeah.
Okay. So my question for you was, I know that you come from a rather large family, originally from Mexico, so with such a large family, is this something that you guys discuss generationally, or is there just something that your family has done through the years that is just expected?
I think it's something where it's new. to my family. It's not something, there isn't generation and generation of history of this. I think it's relatively new. My parents both came here as teenagers, and so I'm the first born, first generation American, and it's something where I don't think that was even a thing
Right.
in
Okay.
back in Mexico in the farm. You know, you inherit the farm and the chickens and the cows, and then you move on from there. And it's something where, you know, my dad grew up farming and at the family farm with cows and chickens and all that stuff. And so I think it's relatively new.
And if he
It's
didn't go to
something
the
where
US, would he have stayed and taken over the farm eventually or worked on the farm with other siblings?
eventually all of them left, but yes,
Okay.
there are some people in that town, in that area, who just stayed, who that's what they did
Gotcha.
their life. You know, and not so much nowadays, but for at least for my parents' age generation, yeah, that's just kind of what they did. That's self-sustaining, run a little side business. You know, my dad said when he was growing up, his goal was to save up enough money to buy a truck so he can go get fruit and then be the fruit selling guy. And then he realized, okay, maybe that's not the best idea. And then he ended up coming up to the States. But it's something where, you know, I think it's relatively new. And I think that's the case a lot of times for families that are new to this country, where the whole financial system is new, credit is new. You know,
Right.
and even to people who were born here, you go back 3 generations, credit is new.
Yes.
You know, even for families who have been in America for a long time, you go back 3 or 4 generations, they were farming in a lot of cases. They
Yes.
were, you know, so I think the whole system is kind of evolving and is relatively new, regardless of where you come from. I think it's just the time and as far as generation goes, where you might have someone whose family's been in America for forever, but you go back 3 generations and they were also farmers, or
Right.
they were also in different industries, or there was no credit. So, you know, I think it's
Not as we know it
relatively
the
new. Not
last,
as you know it. It was
not as
more
we've known it
shake
the
your
last 30
hand,
or
look you
40
in the
years.
eyes, and tell you I'm going to pay you back type of thing.
Right.
You know, but not credit reports, not credit scores,
Yeah.
not all 401ks and all that. So you can continue learning. If you like this topic, Friday's episode of Talk Wealth to Me is on this topic. And you can hear Chase and I, you know, have a longer conversation on it. Or come back in 2 weeks. We have debt and dating just in time for Valentine's Day for all you single people, and even for those of you who are not single and maybe even married. And debt and dating, it was one of our most popular podcast episodes last year, the Valentine's Day one.
Most definitely.
So hope, you know, come and join us and we'll sit down and we'll talk debt and dating. Thank you, everybody.
And now, for all of you who are hungry, go have a sandwich.
Yes, I am going to have a sandwich today.